everyone. We have Viram Shah from Vested Finance. He's the CEO and co-founder, and it's pleasure to have you on our podcast series, Viram.
Likewise, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Roopa. I come from a entrepreneurial family, so uh, at a young age, I kind of got exposure to business and was very enamored by the entire concept of creating value of something from nothing. And so tried my hand at our family business, and actually that's when I realized that what the business is in is kind of not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in more of newer age technology, but uh, at a young age, I realized that at some point I want to do something related to entrepreneurship. So kind of all life decisions since then have been along those lines, trying to reach to that end goal. So tried a bunch of startups when I was in engineering school in Mumbai. Those didn't really take off. Um, post engineering, found my way into finance. So was working at JP Morgan, and that's where the seeds for actually Vested were planted. Where I was working on a lot of global companies on a daily basis, really understood their business well. And so one day I went to our broker and asked him, can I invest in these companies that I know and sort of create wealth as they are growing? And that's when I got the response that, this is not at all possible. You should forget about this idea. And at that point in time, it while it was sort of something that I accepted, it felt unfair that, why do you not have access to a lot of these companies that we know of and are using as well, right? And fast forward to post JP Morgan, moved to the US, moved to Valley, and was at Berkeley. And that's where this idea came back. And there were a couple of classmates of mine who were also from different parts of the world, so from Indonesia, from Hong Kong, and we connected on this pain point that, not just in India but anywhere outside of the US, to be able to diversify your portfolios outside of the country is a very difficult process. It's very costly as well. So can we use technology to simplify that? And that's where the journey began in the second year of business school for us. In fact, we started working on it while we were doing our summer internships, and all through the second year worked on Vested, launched the product after we graduated in May, and yeah, now it's been almost a year and a half.
So I think the journey must have begun right at the time when the idea popped in your head. That's what you're saying. It was kind of shunned by people saying, "Hey, you can't do this." I think that's where you began your journey. You're saying, right? So
Yeah.
what did you do? If did you actually first start with you know, looking at investing in shares yourself after you moved into the business school? Did you start with that first, or did you still work on your idea?
No, in fact, I started investing much earlier because I was in finance. I learned kind of the finance skill set at my JP Morgan stint, and so invested in the local markets right from then. And almost been 3 4 years since I started investing, so I was very familiar with the world of investing. And post going to Berkeley, actually, it was a winding journey to this particular idea. So the entire first year of business school, I was actually focused on solving a mobility problem. I really wanted to do kind of a simpler scooter sharing solution. So in both in India and the US, I tried different versions, a way for last mile transport and doing that in an easy manner. And in fact, now we have a few companies in India that are successful in doing that, right? And so that was something I wanted to do, but I was just in the US, so running an operationally heavy business in India at that point in time didn't work. In the US, again, there were a few companies that had come up, and so it was a little late. But the entire first year, I was working on electric vehicles, and I was really bullish on just electric vehicles as a trend. But that went nowhere. So last minute recruited for an internship, got there, and then we were looking basically this classmate of mine. We were looking back at our backgrounds and kind of pain points we had personally felt, and that was when I remembered this moment, which was like kind of a butterfly moment where I felt this pain but couldn't do anything then, and then we again came back to it and started looking at it.
Over when you moved, away from India and you looked at fractional shares, it's quite popular in the US, right? So most people are aware of this. So the entire cross-border trading, can we talk about that a little? Because I think that seems interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, the space in the US is actually well evolved, where if you look at portfolios, even of retail investors in the US market, about 20% of it is diversified outside the local US market. So there is foreign exposure in their market, in their portfolios already. Whereas if you look at outside of the US, up until like 2 years ago, it was just very difficult to be able to do it. And there were multiple reasons. One was just for something to be set up as a company like Vested, if we had existed 3, 4 years ago, it was a very costly process. And so then those costs get passed on to the consumer, and people just cannot afford it. It doesn't make any sense from a fees standpoint to pay such high fees or to have such minimum deposit requirements. So it's actually been a very nascent kind of field outside of the US. And now we can see this trend globally where a lot of companies are springing up to allow access to different markets in different countries. So be it in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia. And so this is kind of a larger trend that we are part of.
Right. So, if we were to actually look at tech, right, for the entire piece that has been built, so how do you actually talk to systems? Because that would be in terms of, looking at different companies, investing in them. So how does this work? Is this, I'm sure there's a lot of online, data transfer that needs to happen. Uh, if people are investing from India, UAE, so there is a lot of activity from a currency perspective as well. So spot rates, I don't know if you guys look at spot rates. So can we talk about that from a tech perspective, how the entire thing gets mapped?
Yeah, yeah. And so, in fact, to that question, a lot of people ask us, why is Vested now existing? Like, what is different now versus earlier? The idea is not new, right? Investing in international markets, everybody has felt that pain. But what has changed in these last few years? And technology is really the answer to that. What has changed is largely two large trends. One is just the API APIization of everything, right? So APIs available for different parts of the journey is what has enabled us to launch a solution like this. And then the second is just the ecosystem of different pieces being available via APIs that we can plug into our platform. So, for example, there are in a product like ours, there are three major steps. While it looks like it's just executing trades in the US market, there's actually one is onboarding, so being able to open a brokerage account. Second is what you talked about, money movement, right? So converting currencies from Indian rupees to US dollars, the reverse as well. And then the third is kind of executing trades and being able to place trades. So all of those three now actually have significant improvements because of technology, where on the onboarding piece, there are companies that are focused just on KYC, right? There are companies that are providing KYC as a service that now makes opening up US brokerage accounts sitting in a country far away in a cost-effective and easy manner. Earlier, it was a paper process where you had to literally fill a form and send it to some place by post, and who would do that? The second is the money movement. That's still not where we want it to be, but again, things are improving, where cross-border money movement with all of the regulations, anti-money laundering, all of that becoming simpler because of API. So us talking to the banks, us then talking to the broker where the money is coming in and allocating the funds. And then the third is communicating to the exchange, right, to be able to place trades. And that, again, earlier used to take years to build a system, right? You would have to have servers at the exchange and then being able to place trades in a fast manner. Fractional shares is one step beyond that, where you're able to buy one full share as a broker and then distribute it amongst the demand that you have. And so that's really something that is astounding that you can do now. And that, again, is a function of technology being available. And then we plug into our broker via APIs. So all of those things really are different pieces of technology that now make a business like Vested possible.
So can we talk about compliance? Because you did mention, just taking a cue from what you just said, it's a highly regulated market. You're doing cross-border trading. There's a lot of monies involved from different currencies, different countries. So let's talk about how compliance or security is taken care of by Vested Finance through your platform.
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest sort of things we spent time on when we started the business as well, as to, cross border is always tricky. Where do you license yourself? Who is the one who regulates? How do you make sure anti-money laundering rules are kept? How do you make sure KYC standards are the strongest. So all of those different things are what we've thought of. And the way it works for us is, so we have multiple checks in place. So one is the initial KYC, where we are checking against essentially people who are politically exposed or part of any databases when you onboard. We are also checking for authenticity of the verification documents you provide, like the Aadhaar or the PAN. And so that's the first level of check when we open up the brokerage accounts. Once they are opened, the other check that comes in is when the money is moving, right? And so there, from a compliance standpoint, we need to make sure that money is not coming from any fraudulent sources. So you can only transfer money from your own bank account. It has to be the exact matching name as your brokerage account. And so that basically money is not going to any third party, right? It's coming from your bank account to your brokerage account, coming back to India. And so that's one check which we do on our own, but also the banks are part of the process, right? So that's a very strong check inherently in place, where the banks are also doing their checks on their end, like the source of money. There's actually a back end process when the bank transfers US dollar, and there is a manual process where they're checking source of funds if it's a new account, and asking for additional information. So that's a second layer of check. And then the third is on the platform itself, where we are regulated by the SEC as an investment advisor. And so we are subject to audits by the SEC as well, in terms of our fiduciary duty. So we have to keep the user's interest in mind before making any decision. Like, for example, in terms of marketing, we cannot post any testimonials. Basically, we cannot influence anybody saying that they should use Vested by somebody else. And so that's one of the big things that we comply with. And then there's an entire separate kind of books and records program where we have to maintain our trade data, customer data, up to a certain number of years, and have that accessible at any point in time for the regulator. So all of those different things are applicable to a business like ours, and we essentially looked at all of these different pieces and how do we comply with them.
If you look at it, I think the entire company speaks about that millennials are your customers. That kind of drew my attention. So is this like a high risk kind of a thing that you have most of them in a specific age group who are investing? Or do you think the reach has not gone out to the other set of audience? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's so the millennials naturally, because of the fact that they are large in number in India, become a large segment of users for any platform essentially, and it gets talked about a lot. For us, actually, age is not a sort of a segment for our customers, because what we've seen is, yes, 80% of the numbers might come from millennials, but 80% of the actual volume, the dollar volume, comes from the the older clients, right, who have more money and want to invest. So it's sort of an 80-20 split in numbers and in terms of AUM that we see on the platform. What we've seen as defining criteria versus age is like somebody who's digitally savvy. It could be a 50, 60-year-old, or it could be a 20, 25-year-old. Whoever is comfortable using digital platforms is actually very much an audience that we want on the platform, because they are open to this new market as an asset class to add to their portfolio. And so that's what we really focus on. But in terms of the current split, it's a wide range if you look at it from an investment, a dollar investment perspective. But just purely number of accounts is, of course, is the younger generation in India that's definitely moving towards financial products.
So if we were to actually, digress from this and talk a little more about how do you slot yourself when you look at the other players who are indulged in fractional shares in the US, like the Silicon Valley versus the Indian Silicon Valley. So how has it been working for you? Do you see the proportionate growth, or do you think there's lots to do?
There's definitely lots to do. What's the core difference between somebody who's doing it in the US is, here in India, we are actually creating a very new category, right? In the US, if you launch a platform that does investments, essentially people are already familiar with investing in the local markets for them there, right? And so it's more of how can you distribute it in a unique way? What is your unique insight there that allows you to reach scale in a cost-effective manner? Whereas here, when we started off, what we realized was people just don't know the fact that this is legal. The fact that US investing is something that is allowed for an Indian resident, plus why you should do it. Both of those were biggest challenges. So it was kind of, first step is making people aware that this is a problem that they have and that it's something that can be solved. So creating that category of cross-border investments or US investing or just international investing and diversification is one of the core roles that we have to play. And so we always internally talk about the fact that, competition for us is not somebody who does US investing in India, but the 99% of people who are just ignorant about the fact that you should have some part of your portfolio diversified internationally. And so that's the unique challenge that we face. And so what happens is, as more players actually get into that, where essentially more people come onto our platform because the category is getting created. And so that's something that we've observed is different in a business like ours.
So if let's talk a little more about what if I was a customer on Investor Finance. Two questions there, right? So individual customers and also business customers can be on the platform. That is, as a company, you can get on your platform, or is it individual customers?
It's individual.
It's individual.
Yeah.
So as an individual customer, I like the part where you said, hey, this is not like mutual funds where you'll have to earn your money for a next term period. I can actually withdraw at any point of time that I like, right? So
Correct.
So at the end of the day, it is a very high risk. It's almost like poker, and I see that you are a poker player yourself. Yeah. So, make this easy for me. So if I need to go ahead and become your customer, so what are the few things that I need to keep in mind?
Yeah. It's actually really simple. So one is, first is kind of awareness, right? Why you need to do this. A simple answer is, you need to have some part of your portfolio in a different geography, in a different currency. Basically, having 100% in one currency or one market is a very risky thing that people are doing. So why you should do it? Have some money in another portfolio, another geography. Second is, then how much should I look at, right? You could look at a range of 5 to 20% of your portfolio invested internationally. The third then comes to, okay, I'm convinced about doing it. I know how much to allocate. Then how do I go about doing it? And so there is where we come in, where it's a very easy process where there are basically three main steps. So one is opening up a brokerage account. So online takes about 3 to 5 minutes. You need to submit some information, and that's that. The second is the money movement. And so there, what the way it differs from, of course, local investing is you need US dollars because you're investing in the US market. And so there you go through the banks to transfer the funds, and it's done under this scheme that the RBI has released, which is called the liberalized remittance scheme. Basically a way for them to monitor how much money is moving out of the country. And so it's completely legal under it to transfer funds into your brokerage account, and you can do that easily through the platform. And then the third is, okay, money is in, now what do I do? And so there, what we always talk to people is, keep it simple. Don't try and take a lot of risk, etc. In the US market, basically, there are ETFs that are available which allow you to create a portfolio in a very easy manner. So just pick 3 or 4 ETFs which are different assets and asset classes, and that's it. You're set. Look at it from a long-term perspective. So these are just all of the things that you need to keep in mind. I think the last thing that always comes up is tax, and how will tax work for somebody who's an Indian resident. And so there, what you need to keep in mind is, it's going to be in India only. You don't need to pay any tax in the US. And what we do is, we help with a report that will basically tell you how much gains or losses you've made. And the first time you do it, there is a new sort of filing that you need to do. But once you've done it once, you'll be able to do it easily the next time.
So how much of this, just that part, Viram, that I'd like to pick up, and I'm sure people who are viewing this podcast would like to understand the conversion, the currency conversion. Is that a hassle? Do you think that will come onto your platform as well at some point of time?
It definitely will. Definitely will. And I mean, if you look at it, it definitely still is not where we want it to be. When we started off, I can definitely call it a hassle when we started off, because you would have had to go to the bank branch, find a branch manager, explain to him you need to transfer money to your brokerage account. He would have no idea. He would call up 5 other people, and then you would finally get a form that you need to fill up and all of that. So we did this. We went to like 15 branches when we started off to survey, how does the process work, and it was painful. It's come a long way since then. Now you can do it online with a few banks. It's still not on the platform. The next step will be to bring it on the platform to make it even more seamless and transparent. But in terms of the reduction of hassle, it's been significant. I think it will become even more over the next few months.
Sure. So how does the transfer back into the account happen? So this is through you're saying that this happens through text seamlessly. It's back into my account, or then it comes into the brokerage account and then I bring it back into my account. How does this work?
Yeah, so there are two things here. One is that you can hold cash in your brokerage account. So not necessary that whenever you sell, you need to bring the money back directly. You can keep, let's say, $5,000 in your account, buy, sell whenever you want, and then only when you want to redeem it in local currency is when you bring your money back to India. And there again, it's a process where you just give us your India bank details, and the money is wired back to your India bank account.
Got it. Got it. No, sounds very interesting. The entire piece. I'm sure a lot of people who don't know about this, because I have a lot of friends who actually trade internationally because they are not from India. I mean, they're not they have a US citizenship. But for the other people who are from India and who want to really invest, right? I think this is a way to go. Yeah, I definitely think so.
And I really hope so too.
So, Viram, the last bit of conversation that I wanted to have with you is something every founder in India wants, right? This is a leadership level, a CTO who's a lady, right? At the end of the day, we talk about so many CTOs, head of engineering, and VPs who are, I'm not gender driven, but at the end of the day, it's quite male populated. So at the end of the day, people want a diversity there, a diversity hiring, and you guys seem to have cracked that. So can we talk a little about how it's worked out for the three of you? I think it's a complete mix in terms of culture as well. So let's hit upon that.
Yeah, I think our leadership team is very interesting. Firstly, we all come from different countries. So I of course, grew up in India. Darwin, my co-founder and the CEO, he grew up in Indonesia, now lives in the US. And then Ying, who's our CTO, she grew up in Singapore and then now again lives in the US. So one is just country diversity. And then there's, of course, gender diversity, where Ying, who's our CTO, I mean, she is a boss. We're super lucky to have her on our team. And yeah, I mean, and we got lucky, right? We were really, so Darwin, Eric, and I, three of us started off, and we realized that while we were all technical in terms of our backgrounds, we weren't hardcore coders, and so we needed to plug that gap. And so Ying was somebody who we identified, but it was a long sort of marinating process, from meeting her to then bringing her on board. And we had to do a lot of courting, if I can put it that way, to be able to bring her on board. She was at Google, which was another entire task, of convincing somebody from leaving Google to join a young fledgling company. But I mean, what we did was, so slowly, kind of got her familiar with what we're doing. Also, got the opportunity to become familiar with her as a person, and sort of she started looking into attending calls, looking into what we were doing at that point in time, mentoring the engineers a little by little. And then now, almost, I think it's been a year and a half or more than that, she joined us full time, and it's been incredible. I think what it does is, it adds a very different perspective of the way we look at things, and not just, I mean, gender wise, but also from her background, right? She comes from Google, a very well run company, and so all of those things help us in making our day-to-day decisions, adding some structure to the way we do things. And so we, all of us are constantly learning from each other. And it also helps attract new talent, right? Just having a role model, a female role model in the company, really helps all of the people who are joining later to kind of aspire to be something like her. And I think that has really helped us attract talent, attract women talent as well from India, where majority of our team is based. And so that's been another entire benefit which we really hadn't thought of, but it's playing out now as well.
This is excellent. In fact, loads of people who would want to listen and understand how they can actually come and join your team. Uh, we would like you to share some information on this podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So it's easy. It's easy. We basically look for culture and passion. Everything else is fine. A dropout. I mean, we don't need any stellar undergrad institutes, any companies. I think the people we have on our team are first at this point hired largely for culture. And in terms of culture, what we look for is somebody who has the growth mindset, kind of wants to improve as a person, wants to help other people improve as a person. somebody who's willing to learn. I think those are the key things that we look for. And then, of course, if you have or if you're passionate about the field, just investing in general or finance, fintech in general, that is an additional bonus. Oftentimes, people who we've onboarded have really created a role for their own. Like we never had a role. They reached out. They were either customers of ours or were people who were really interested in doing something unique and created a role for themselves. So what I would say is, just if you're interested, then just reach out. Don't look at openings or anything of that sort. We'll figure out what to do if there's a good fit.
Sure, sure. The other piece that I wanted to actually ask you, Viram, is because we are almost at the end of our podcast. Wanted to check with you on if there is anything that you would like to share with future customers who would like to get onboarded onto your platform, or for tech guys who want to come join you, or even product guys who are actually watching this. Just a general view, if you'd like to share, we'd be happy to actually talk about it.
Yeah, I think for us, basically as a company, what we're looking to do is kind of innovate in a space that hasn't really seen much innovation in India, especially is this entire area of cross-border wealth. And so our vision is to go beyond, I mean, what we're doing right now as well, and just own the space of cross-border wealth and kind of do things that have never been done before. And so that's really what we are after. And so if somebody's interested in kind of setting or finding new paths to do things, discovering new pain points and solving them, Vested will be a very interesting space. We are a remote team, so even pre-COVID, we were remote because we have centers in the US, so we were headquartered in the US, based in India, and so very flexible in terms of work. Like there is basically complete transparency. That's all we ask for, but everything else is initiative and self-initiative. So if you're somebody who is keen on remote, is essentially somebody who's self-driven, then again, this might be a very good culture for a new hire looking to join us. We are definitely always looking for tech and product people. I think that's an area we're very much focused on onboarding new folks. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the focus is on sort of culture and passion. And if that is exhibited, then basically that's a good fit for us.
Awesome. So I think to all those people who are listening to this podcast, two things I think I'd like to pinpoint for people to relate to. One would definitely be, because you're a mixed culture, I think it'd be quite interesting to work with your team. That's one that I'd like to talk about. Second, the field, the domain itself is extremely interesting because one, it's highly regulated. Second, at least I'm speaking for India, the cross-border trading seems like sweet spot for me if I look at it from a domain perspective. So all those people who are listening to this podcast and who want to work with a young team, I think most of you guys are young out there. So I think there'll be a lot of energy and passion that will be oozing out for the entire team. So I'm sure they should come and join you. Yeah. So I'm just advocating on your behalf.
Thank you. That really helps for sure.
Alrighty. So would there be anything else that you'd like to talk about then, Viram?
No, nothing else from my end. I think just one last thing: people are really the core for us, and without them, we don't think we'll be able to create a good company, a great company rather. And so, just any kind of people that are interested in Vested, then reach out. Coordinates are viram@vestedfinance.co.
Excellent. So thank you so much for joining this podcast. I think the entire experience has been great. I've learned quite a bit about what you guys do. I'm sure people who are watching this also have learned. Hope more customers come on to Vested Finance. Wishing you guys all the very best. And hopefully you guys get to do, the brilliant stuff that we're waiting to watch and see how it's going to grow. Yeah.
Thank you, Roopa. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.